What would you do if at just 13 years old, your parents packed your bags, left them on the porch, and chose to erase you from their lives? Imagine coming home from school and realizing you no longer belong there. No goodbye hug, no tears, just a suitcase and a door that never opened again. Now imagine this. 16 years later, those same parents walk into a lawyer's office smiling, convinced they're about to inherit millions. But instead, they hear a sentence that changes everything. She was adopted, legally, years ago. How would it feel to realize the child you threw away was never yours to claim again? Tonight's story isn't just about rejection, it's about the spare child, the one who was never the favorite, the one who had to earn love like it was rent. It's about abandonment, about quiet resilience, and about the day karma didn't scream. It whispered in a conference room on the 32nd floor. Stay with me, because what happened next made two parents realize that choices have expiration dates. And before we begin, if stories about strength, betrayal, and emotional justice move you, subscribe to the channel and like this video. Your love keeps these stories alive. Now, take a deep breath, because this one will stay with you long after it ends. My name is Eliza Morgan. I'm 29 years old. 16 years ago, when I was just 13, my parents told me to pack a bag and go stay somewhere else for a while. That while turned into forever. Last month, they walked into a glass conference room in downtown Chicago with confident smiles and a high-priced attorney, fully convinced they were about to inherit everything from the one man who raised me after they didn't want to anymore. But instead, they hear a sentence that changes everything. She was adopted, legally, years ago. Before I tell you what happened in that room, take a second. If you believe that boundaries are not disrespect, if you believe that sometimes the people who share your DNA aren't the ones who show up for you, then subscribe and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? I read every single one. To understand why that moment hit so hard, you have to go back to a small brick house on the south side of Chicago in the summer of 2009. I grew up in a home where love felt like a reward you had to earn, and I was always just a few points short. My father, Daniel Morgan, worked construction, long hours, short temper. My mother, Claire, ran a daycare from our living room. She loved order, she loved appearances, and she loved my older brother, Tyler. Tyler had my father's athletic build, my mother's bright smile. He was the golden child, straight A's, varsity basketball, teachers who called him a natural leader. I was quieter. I read books at the kitchen table while chaos buzzed around me. I asked too many questions. I noticed things. And in our house, noticing things wasn't encouraged. When Tyler turned 16, my parents bought him a used car. We couldn't afford much, they said, but somehow they could afford that. When I turned 13, 3 months later, I got a card signed with a rushed, "Love, Mom and Dad," and a candle stuck in a grocery store cupcake. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was being dramatic. But there are small moments that carve themselves into you. Like the afternoon I found out my parents had opened a college fund for Tyler when he was 6. I asked my mom, carefully, if I had one too. She didn't look up from folding laundry. Tyler has more potential. We have to invest wisely. Invest wisely. That was the day I realized I wasn't seen as a daughter. I was a cost-benefit calculation. The breaking point came over something that on the surface looked small. I had applied, without telling anyone, to a statewide writing fellowship. 10 students selected, full scholarship, 6 weeks in New York, workshops, mentors, a chance to see if the voice inside my head meant something. When the acceptance email came, I stared at the screen until the words blurred. For the first time, someone outside my house had chosen me. I showed my parents that night. My father read it once and shrugged. New York is expensive. It's fully funded, I said. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. You'd be gone all summer. Who's going to help with the daycare? Tyler spoke up from the couch. Mom, I need money for basketball camp. There it was. 3 days later, my mom handed me a printed email she had drafted from my account, declining the fellowship. I already told them you won't be attending. Family comes first. Something inside me snapped. I'm going, I said. The silence that followed felt dangerous. My father stood up slowly. If you walk out that door against our wishes, don't expect to walk back in. I was 13. I thought it was a bluff. It wasn't. When I came home from school the next day, my backpack was on the porch, a single suitcase beside it. My mother stood in the doorway. You want independence? Go learn what it feels like. I waited on that porch for 3 hours. My neighbors walked by. No one asked questions. Finally, my Aunt Rebecca pulled into the driveway. She wasn't even supposed to know. A teacher had called her after I didn't show up to an after-school program. She drove 40 minutes without asking permission. She stepped out of her car, took one look at me sitting there, and wrapped me in her arms. You're not unwanted, she whispered. Not by me. I didn't know it then, but that night my parents signed guardianship papers, quietly, officially. They told everyone it was temporary. It wasn't. Aunt Rebecca lived in a small apartment above her bakery. The place always smelled of cinnamon and sugar. It wasn't big, but it was warm in a way my childhood never had been. She gave me a key the first night. You live here, she said, not as a guest, as family. Those words rebuilt something in me that I didn't know was still standing. Over the next decade, I worked like my life depended on it, because it felt like it did. I finished high school with honors. I earned a scholarship to Northwestern. I studied communications and business. I interned at marketing firms. I worked weekends at the bakery to help Rebecca expand her shop into a second location. By 26, I was running digital strategy for 3 regional food brands. By 28, I launched my own agency. And through it all, Rebecca was there. At every graduation, every late-night panic call, every small victory. My parents reached out exactly twice in 16 years. Once when Tyler got into legal trouble and they needed money. Once when they saw my company featured in a business magazine. Both times the message was the same under the surface. What can you give us? I didn't answer. Then, last year, Rebecca was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. It moved fast. In her final months, she met frequently with her attorney. I didn't ask about the details. I was too busy trying to memorize her laugh. She passed away on a quiet Tuesday morning in March, with my hand in hers. 2 weeks later, I received a call from a law office informing me that the will would be read on April 10th. The day before the reading, my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in years. My mother. Eliza, she said, her voice suddenly soft. We heard about Rebecca. We're so sorry. There was a pause, heavy with unspoken things. We also heard there's a will reading, she continued. As your parents, we have a right to be there. That was the first time in 16 years she had called herself my parent without hesitation. I hung up without agreeing to anything. The conference room was on the 32nd floor of a sleek building overlooking the river. Floor-to-ceiling windows, polished wood table, quiet power. I arrived early. When my parents walked in, they looked polished, prepared. My father in a new navy suit, my mother with perfectly styled hair, my brother Tyler behind them, scrolling on his phone, and a sharply dressed attorney at their side. They didn't sit near me. They didn't say hello. When the reading began, it was all procedural at first: property listings, investment accounts, ownership of the bakery locations. Then came the line that changed the air in the room. I leave the entirety of my estate, including all business holdings, intellectual property, and real assets, to my legally adopted daughter, Eliza Morgan. Adopted? My mother's head snapped toward me. What? She whispered. The attorney continued reading. Rebecca Morgan finalized the adoption of Eliza Marie Morgan in August 2011. At that time, Eliza's biological parents had voluntarily transferred guardianship and relinquished parental claims. My father stood up. That was temporary. The attorney calmly slid a certified copy of the signed documents across the table. It wasn't temporary. They had signed everything away. Every right, every claim. 16 years ago. My mother's